Presentation. Stay with Fox.
From the campus of the College of Charleston, home of the Cougars, a Huckabee special. Forum 2, South Carolina, undecided. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Mike Huckabee.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Huckabee, coming to you from the beautiful Sotilli Theater at the College of Charleston. This theater is filled with undecided voters from South Carolina. Now, the Palmetto State's primary is just a week away, and polls are showing that a significant number of voters here in South Carolina are still undecided on which Republican candidate they're going to vote for. I want to say how grateful we are today to receive the hospitality of all of the people of South Carolina, and especially the people of this lovely city, Charleston. If you've never been to Charleston, it is one of the most beautiful, charming, historic, and hospitable places you will ever experience. In fact, we're here today largely because we needed an excuse to come to Charleston to enjoy this lovely city and this beautiful campus. I want to introduce today a special guest who's in the audience. Very honored to have the governor of South Carolina, Nikki Haley, with us. Governor Haley, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. Well, you may know that since 1980, no GOP nominee has been able to win without South Carolina. How painfully I know that. But someone who comes on this stage tonight is going to be the nominee for the Republican Party. And for many of us, we hope, the next president of the United States. The format is going to be unique because what we're going to do is to let undecided voters ask questions. Now, sometimes people say, why are there so many undecided voters? And that gives people some sense of pause and anxiety. Let me assure you, it's not because these are not great candidates, because I believe that every last one of them are truly great candidates. Have you ever been really hungry and you go to the grocery store and you walk through the aisles, and because you're really hungry, you're looking around and you just can't decide what to get because it all looks good? To those pundits who think that the reason that people are undecided is because they don't find something they like, I suggest that it's because they find something they like in all of the candidates. Tonight, we hope that maybe they'll be brought to a point of decision. Now, each of the 5 candidates are going to appear individually. They'll be answering questions, and they're going to get exactly the same amount of time. Each one of them will be given about 12 minutes. They'll have the opportunity to answer questions. Now, candidates are going to be required to focus on the questions that are being posed. They are not to mention and not to attack the other candidates. The order. They like that in South Carolina. The order in which you see them was determined by a drawing prior to the event. And instead of journalists, as I've said, questions are going to come from undecided South Carolina voters right here in our audience. And we hope that today's forum will help them make a decision. The questions are being asked from the audience members themselves. At the close, each candidate is going to be given a minute to provide some summary remarks. Texas Congressman Ron Paul declined our repeated invitations to tonight's forum. He is campaigning in Nevada today. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about this forum. You can post all of your thoughts on our wall at facebook.com/Huckabee Show. You can also tweet us using the hashtag HuckForum. Also joining me to explain why South Carolina is so important in the nomination process, our special host, South Carolina Congressman Tim Scott. Congressman Scott, it's great to be with you in your district. Tell us why South Carolina is so important to the process. They love their congressman here in Charleston. Congressman, tell us why South Carolina is so important in this process.
Well, Governor, you know, it's 2008. You were my nominee, by the way. I want to make sure everybody knows that. So, South Carolina is so important in this conversation, in this process, because since 1980, we have not chosen the wrong candidate. We have 48% who are still willing to change their minds because we have very good candidates running this year. And we need to make sure that we make the best choice because I believe America follows South Carolina.
Congressman Tim Scott. An honor to be in your district. Delighted to be here. You'll be sharing with us and some of the folks that you will see. Now, the first candidate in today's forum is former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. Please welcome Governor Romney to the stage.
Hi, guys. Hello,
Governor,
Mike.
it's great to have you here.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.
So let's go to Congressman Tim Scott, who is out in the audience, and he has the first question of the day.
Governor, the first question comes from Shanna Shepard.
Welcome, Governor Romney, to the great state of South Carolina.
Thank you.
I'm Shanna Shepard. I was a housing industry executive for 33 years. And I lost that source of income due to the lack of funding for new home construction and the lack of the ability for consumers to get home loans without these huge down payments. So my question to you today is, what will you do to protect Americans' rights to own their own homes and to restore the housing industry that is so critical to our economy?
Well, thank you. And first, let me say how much I enjoy being in Charleston. I'm sure glad that Mike made this event here in Charleston, one of the most beautiful cities in the world. It's great to be with you today. And your question about housing is a question people across the country are concerned about. And sometimes they look and say, can government do something to help? I'd like to make sure government stops doing things that hurt. With the passage of new legislation, the Dodd-Frank legislation, all sorts of new regulations were put upon the banking industry and made it much more difficult for them to be able to make loans and to make the kind of mortgage provisions that would make it easier for people to buy homes. Now, I also want to tell you, I'm not going to go back to those years of yesteryear, where Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were handing out mortgage guarantees to people who couldn't possibly repay them, where there was almost no down payment, in some cases no down payment, interest-only mortgages. That got us in real trouble. And so what we're going to have to do to get the housing market back going is to do the one thing that America really cries for right now, and that is to get the economy going again. If we have jobs back in this country, with 9.9% unemployment in South Carolina, people here are suffering and can't buy homes. We got to get people back to work so they can afford homes. And then we got to get our regulatory system to encourage our private sector, our banks, to start making loans again, to start providing mortgages. But my view is I do not want to see us go back to the days of cheap mortgages, guaranteed by the government, which gets prices completely out of line. I want to get the government out of the housing business, let the market work.
Thank you very much. We'll go now to our next question.
And I have a follow-up.
Okay.
Would you continue to support mortgage interest being a tax deduction?
I do continue to support that, yes. I think at this stage, for us to say that we're going to eliminate the home mortgage interest deduction, you'd have a very significant depressing effect on home prices. So I continue to support that as a deduction, yes.
Thank you very much, Shanna. Our next question, you step forward. Please state your name and then present your question to Governor Romney.
Thank you, Governor. My name is Don McDonough, and I have a question about separation of power. The president wrestling with Congress over recess appointments is really nothing new, but in a historical sense, the combination of things like the DREAM Act, the expansion of regulatory power at the EPA and labor, the new Consumer Financial Protection Regulatory Agency against the protest of Congress, as well as the recess appointments made while the Congress really isn't in recess, and it's all done under the slogan of "we can't wait," really seems like an assumption of power that's not actually granted in the Constitution. So my question is, would you comment on your view of this? And if you're elected president, how would your administration behave differently?
Well, I think what you're seeing with the president is extra constitutional action, where he is taking his friends and putting them into positions of power. And I think perhaps the most egregious example of that is what's happened with the National Labor Relations Board. He basically is paying back organized union labor by taking union stooges, putting them into the National Labor Relations Board so they'll do his bidding and they'll follow his policies. The decision that the NLRB made to tell Boeing you can't build a factory in South Carolina because it's a if you will, pro-worker, right-to-work state is simply wrong. And if I'm president of the United States, I will make sure that the NLRB and other institutions of that nature are not interfering with the will of the people. I think one of the things the president had as a great failure in his first term, and by the way, his only term, is is that he came into office with a Democrat House and a Democrat Senate. It didn't think he needed to work across the aisle to build relationships and trust and respect with Republicans. And so he pushed through his agenda without respect to the feelings of the American people and those that have been elected in the opposition party. And so now that you have a Republican House, he doesn't like it anymore. He doesn't want to have to work with both parties. He wants to jam through whatever he'd like to do without reference to the will of the American people and to our party. If I'm president of the United States, I've learned a lesson by being a governor in a state where there are a few Democrats. My legislature was 85% Democrat. I learned I had to get along with the other guys and work with them. I will find common ground, I will follow the Constitution, and I will respect the people of America. Thank you.
Don, thank you very much for your question. We're going to continue with Governor Romney right after this break, and he'll take the remainder of his time. Stay with us. Welcome back to Huckabee Forum 2. South Carolina, undecided. And we continue with Governor Mitt Romney. Let's go back to the audience for the next question. Your name, please, and your question for Governor Romney.
Bryant Tapman. Governor, I'm a Ron Paul supporter, and there are a whole lot of us out here this time in the political process. If you win the nomination, there's no guarantee that you'll have our support in November, but you are going to need it in order to defeat Barack Obama. After Romney Care and your support of the TARP bailouts, we have questions about your free market principles. How do you plan on getting us on board with you and convincing us that you and Obama aren't just different sides of the same coin?
Well, President Obama represents a very different direction for America. I hope you understand that he and I would take America very different places. My view is that we have to have the strongest military in the world to protect us from the threats around the world. His view is that we should continue to cut the military. He's going to cut the spending by about $1 trillion, and that would make America a far weaker nation militarily. He also has a view that we should continue to spend massively more than we take in. And like Ron Paul, and I think every Republican who's running in this race, I want to cut federal spending, I want to cap federal spending, and I want to balance the budget. So where we head is very different. And finally, let me just note that I've spent my life in the private sector, 25 years in the business world. I understand how the economy works. I understand how jobs come and they go. And like Ron Paul, I will do our very best to keep our economy thriving and growing, not by having the government lead and having the government guide this economy, but instead by having free people and their dreams making America what has always been the hope of the earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now our next question, if you will, state your name and the question for Governor Romney.
Governor Romney, my name is Richard Lacavera. As a family practice physician for 38 years and a Medicare participant whose income is totally dependent on the present Medicare reimbursement formula, I'm facing another threat of a reduction in this reimbursement of 27.4% on March the 1st. Opting out of Medicare participation is a reasonable choice. Other physicians have already chosen that pathway or retirement. Governor Romney, what changes in Medicare reimbursement formula do you propose which would prevent physicians from opting out of Medicare to ensure that they continue to provide health care to seniors and military families?
Well, you understand that President Obama and people of his party have a very different view about health care than we have. Their view is that in order to try and hold down the cost of health care, including Medicare and Medicaid, as well as the private side of health care, that government needs to put in place price controls and cost controls and tell doctors how much they can get reimbursed for their services. That's the course they've taken. It hasn't worked. We have the highest cost of health care in the world. My view is we got to get health care to act more like a market. And so what I do, similar to what Congressman Paul Ryan described, is ultimately reshape Medicare, not for current retirees, but for retirees of the future, reshape it as more like Medicare Advantage today, where individuals are able to choose with a premium support payment, either traditional Medicare or private Medicare plans. And they can make the choice between the two different plans and decide which is best for them. That, I believe, is the right course to protect Medicare for future generations and to allow doctors to compete with one another, hospitals to compete. I think the best way to keep quality up and costs down is to allow competition in a marketplace way rather than having the government set the reimbursement rates and jam those down upon you and other providers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our next question, if you would state your name and then your question for Governor Romney.
My name is Charlotte Salmons. As a Christian, I am deeply disturbed that there seems to be a growing anti-Christian sentiment in this country. The Constitution says the government will make no restrictions regarding religion, and yet there seem to be more and more restrictions against religion all the time. This is exactly the opposite intention of the Constitution, in my opinion. As President of the United States, what would you do to protect the freedom of religion in this country?
Thank you, Charlotte. And the answer is, at every turn, at every issue that would reach my desk, I will stand up for the ability of Americans to worship God as they choose. I will not proceed down the path that I think you're seeing across this country, which is to try and secularize America. I think we ought to be able to have manger scenes at Christmas times and menorahs representing other faiths. Look, we are a believing people. The Declaration of Independence established our rights by saying that they were created not by government, but by the Creator. We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. I will fight to preserve America's tradition as a religious nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. And now our next question, if you will, come and state your name and your question, please.
Hi, Governor Romney. My name is Ann Ford. Can you convince me, as a true conservative, why we should vote for you, a moderate Republican, against any of the other candidates? Will you flip-flop if you are elected and break campaign promises like Obama has?
And let me tell you, you have an opportunity to get to know me best by looking at my record as governor. I served as governor for 4 years, not my whole life, obviously, but in that responsibility, I had a number of issues that came to my desk. And I think you'll find I served as a conservative governor. Let me tell you what they were. We balance a budget every year for 4 years. At the end of my term, we put in place a $2 billion rainy day fund, even though we started with a $3 billion budget gap. We cut taxes 19 times. I also empowered our state police to enforce immigration law in our state. I fought for and was able to successfully implement English immersion in our schools. We drove our schools, by the way, to be #1 in the nation. And by the way, we all talk about cut, cap, and balance the federal budget. I actually did cut our budget in Massachusetts. In my first year, I didn't just slow down the rate of growth of government, I cut the spending in our state. And by the way, the number of employees that reported to the governor, all the departments and agencies in Massachusetts, by the time I left office, were fewer than by the time when I came into office. So I don't know whether in a minute I can convince you, but I have a conservative record. I wrote a book called No Apology, describing my view of how to make America strong for the next generation. I love this country. I love America. I'm convinced that the principles that I've described, principles of conservatism, are what will keep America the shining city on a hill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Governor Romney, you hit the mark exactly, so I think you're perfect. Thank you very much, Governor Romney. We're going to see you at the close of the hour, so you'll be able to come back and give a minute summation. Remember, still ahead, we have Rick Perry, Rick Santorum, John Huntsman, and Newt Gingrich all coming up. Stay with us. We will be right back from Charleston. Welcome back to the beautiful city of Charleston, South Carolina, to Huckabee Forum 2. South Carolina undecided. Our next presidential candidate, former Utah Governor John Huntsman. Please welcome Governor Huntsman.
Thank you. Mike, what a treat.
Hello, John. Great to see you.
What an honor. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And once again, we're going to do what we did before. We're going to go to Congressman Tim Scott, who has our first question for Governor Huntsman.
Thank you, Governor. Inga Sullivan.
Hi there. In the first 30 days as President of the United States, what could you do to have any positive impact on America and people like me that may vote for you?
Thank you for the question. And let me say first and foremost, it's an honor to be with Governor Huckabee. The last time we were on a stage together, we were playing with a rock band called REO Speedwagon.
Yes, we were.
I'd have a hard time figuring that one out. It was fun. Thank you for the question. The answer is very simple, and that is I would lead. Today, we have no leadership. We have no one who is doing what needs to be done on Capitol Hill and driving forward the work of the people. I understand that there's a certain rhythm to politics. I found this out when I was governor, and that is if you don't strike, right after you're put into office and well articulate your priorities, the two or three things you want to get done, and sit down with your legislature or sit down with leaders of Congress, you're never going to get it done. And I would be very clear on the three things that I want to get done starting my first day in office, and that would be tax reform. Why? Because we're driving a 1955 Chevy trying to travel on the superhighway of the 21st century, and we wonder why we can't compete. And I'd say number two is cleaning up the regulatory mess that we find in this country that is inhibiting our creative class from doing what they do best. And third would be taking steps toward energy independence. Crystal clear in terms of how I would articulate that. I'd sit down with the members of Congress, and within 30 days, we would have a roadmap laid out, knowing full well that if you can't get that done in the first year and a half in office, that door closes and you lose the will of the people. And that's a bad place to be.
Thank you very much. Now, our next question, state your name and your question, please.
Yeah, good evening, Governor Huntsman. This is Calvin Dilks. Three-part question for you. With so many Americans out of work, would you continue to sanction almost 1 million people coming to this country and taking the high-tech jobs, high-paying jobs? And what about our college children that are graduating without jobs? And that's it.
Well, your first question was about brain power coming into this country. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's people from outside of this country coming in legally and taking the high-tech jobs and the best-paying jobs that we have currently in the country.
Well, let me just say to that we need to fix our immigration system. It is absolutely broken. And number one, we owe it to the people of this country in order to have any intellectual honesty at all around immigration to secure the southern border. And I would look forward to working with the border governors and making sure that we got that done. But while doing that, we also need to remember that we have a problem in the movement of people. So for those who are coming into our country, studying at our universities, I would like to incentivize them to stay behind and use their brain power to help expand and develop our economic base to help create jobs. This is the way this economy has always benefited. And I would also say that while we're at it, you know, this country has lost a huge amount of market share in the area of travel and tourism. I'd say, Mike, right here in Charleston, a very significant impact to this economy. We've gone from 17% of inbound travel and tourism to about 10% market share. You know how many billions of dollars we've lost and how many jobs have been completely eradicated because our movement of people policies are completely broken. That starts with a leader who can fix the Department of Homeland Security, which has become overly regulated, overly bureaucratic, and it has hindered our ability to get ahead in life.
All right, we've got a couple of more minutes for this segment before we take a second segment. So next question, please.
Governor Huntsman, my name is Justin Parfrey. You are adamantly pro-life. However, you place stipulations on the definition in cases of rape, incest, or harm to the mother. If every single life is created by God, how do we place stipulations on these lives, and what would you do as president to protect them?
I'm very clear on my pro-life philosophy. I have always been pro-life, and I always will be. And I have a daughter sitting right there in front of you. Her name is Gracie May. She's from China. She was born in a country where life isn't always valued. She was abandoned at 2 months of age in a vegetable market. We now have her in our family, and I thank her mother every day for giving her life. I have stipulations with rape and incest and health life of the mother. That's the conclusion that I have drawn after having looked at it, investigated it, and thought through it very, very carefully. That's where I am. It's where I always have been, and I hope it's good enough for you. Thank you.
Let's take one more question from this section, then we'll take a break and come back. Your name and your question for Governor Huntsman.
Good evening, Governor. My name is Jack Rossi. The ultimate candidate for this most highest of offices could face the possibility of $1 billion worth of dirty tricks. Do you anticipate, in that respect, sir, the creation of an undercurrent of religious prejudice? If so, how do you plan on defending your faith and your beliefs?
Thank you, Jack. I intend to defend who I am, my faith, my beliefs, and my family by being who I am. Because in the end, the good voters and the good people of this country are going to come to know the nominee of the Republican Party in every way, shape, and form. And they're going to come to know the family of the nominee of this party. And all you can do is to be your best, and when you are your best, and when you radiate whatever values you have, the good people of this country are going to come to know you. And I think they're going to come to appreciate that. Whether it's $1 billion, $2 billion, $5 billion, it won't penetrate the goodness I think that a leader can project when done right. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. We're going to continue with Governor Huntsman right after the break, so stay with us. Also, remember to post your thoughts about the forum. You can do that on our wall at facebook.com/Huckabee Show. Also, tweet us. Use the hashtag HuckForum. Welcome back to Charleston, South Carolina. We're going to continue with Governor Jon Huntsman. Let's go back to the audience for our next question. Please state your name and your question.
Good afternoon, Governor. I'm David Tilley. The nation which put a man on the moon is now unable to put a man into space without buying a ride from Russia. China has launched their own space station and announced their intention to go to the moon. What role do you see manned spaceflight playing in America's future, and what would you do to expedite development of a new launch system?
I have two boys that are beginning their journey in the United States Navy. They were inspired by the early space stories that they heard about, and I believe there are two very important things that come from a space program that we must afford, by the way. One is the inspiration that it gives to the next generation. I was part of, the early moon landing generation, 9 years old when that happened, and I was inspired. And I know the next generation is similarly inspired. So there's the inspiration dimension, but second, there's the economic benefit, the technology that is derived as we build and develop a successful space program. I will not subcontract out our space program to any other country. That just is not going to work. But I also want to make sure we have an economy that allows us to have the very best space program we can bring together as a people, because it is one, inspirational, and two, I think it carries huge economic development benefits as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
Good afternoon, Governor Huntsman. My name is Ryan Smith.
Thanks, Ryan.
And my question is, in 1979, the Department of Education had a $14.5 billion budget with staffed at just under 100 people. Today, we have a $32 billion budget in the U.S. Department of Education with staffed at over 5,100 people. With that growth in manpower and budget, we have paid since then over $500 billion in taxes, and yet the U.S. Department of Education has not proven to us that they should be in the classrooms across America. My question is, where do you stand as the U.S. Department of Education being inside a classroom, or should they step out and let the American people take care of the education?
Ryan, that's a pretty simple answer, and it's so long to the Department of Education. Now here's why I say that, because our family has conducted the most extensive clinical trial I've ever seen in the area of education. I've raised 7 kids. We've seen public, we've seen private. My daughter was homeschooled, she's a pianist. We've seen international schools, and I walk away from that experience with certain beliefs. One, I can't find the value added in the Department of Education. Number two, we need to get education policy as close to the local decision makers as possible, because families, parents, teachers, local elected officials, they don't want their schools to fail. And number three, we need to have more choice in the classroom. I led the choice movement when I was governor of the state of Utah, because every child enters a classroom with a different aptitude, temperament, and approach to learning. And I say a one-size-fits-all model is never going to cut it in this country. Finally, let me just say, I think the most important thing we can do for learning everywhere, regardless of your point of origin or your socioeconomic background, we need to focus more as people on early childhood development. Because if our young kids can nail those pillars of literacy around math and reading by age 6 or 7, you will have given those kids the greatest gift possible. You will have given them the gift of literacy. And they're going to go through their educational careers doing a whole lot better as opposed to those who fall short, in which case you have remediation, kids falling through the cracks, and a less productive workforce in the end. Those are my biases on education, and I think they're derived from having been tested in an area, in a state that really did focus on reality when it comes to education and what was best for our families and best for our kids. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you very much. We have less than 90 seconds remaining with Governor Huntsman. We go to our next question in the audience.
Governor Huntsman, my name is Kathy McDuffie. My question is about foreign aid. Our State Department is spending millions of dollars rebuilding or repairing mosques in Egypt, Cyprus, and other countries. In Cairo, $770 million was spent on improving their sewer system while our infrastructure goes wanting for lack of funding. We have a trade deficit with China of over $600 billion, yet we gave that country $7 million to fight air pollution. Budget cuts do not seem to be nearly as deep for foreign programs as for our domestic ones. How would you, as president, strive to change this picture, or would you defend these practices?
And Governor, we're short on time, but I'm going to let you answer the question.
I'll give you a very simple answer on this, and that is if our invested dollar doesn't have a return to the American people by way of expanding our economy and creating jobs, I don't want anything to do with it. My foreign policy will be to get our house in order. You understand what I'm saying? Because when we are broken at home, which we are, we can't project the values of liberty, democracy, human rights, and free markets. And right now, our home is broken, and we've got to get it fixed. Thank
Governor Huntsman, thank you very, very much. Great to be with you. When we come back, more with our candidates, and we'll see Governor Huntsman and all the candidates at the end. Still ahead, Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich, and Rick Perry. We'll be right back. From the beautiful city of Charleston, South Carolina, this magnificent campus of the College of Charleston, we welcome you back to Huckabee Forum 2, South Carolina Undecided. Our next presidential candidate, former House Speaker Newt Gingrich. Please welcome Speaker Gingrich.
Mike.
Hey, Newt.
Good to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks for being here today. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Tim Scott, who is going to introduce our first question for this segment.
Our first question comes from Maggie Rodenberg.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of all South Carolina voters for traveling here to answer our questions. I'm currently 6 months pregnant with twins and have been recently laid off from my job in corporate America. We hear a lot about jobs. Our unemployment's coming close to 10% in this state. What exactly is your plan to help create jobs on a national scale, but more specifically in light of our environment here in South Carolina, so I don't have to worry about my future and my family's future?
Well, first of all, congratulations on the twins. I hope that turns out to be a wonderful, wonderful thing. At the national level, I worked with President Reagan on a job-creating program of lower taxes, less regulation, more American energy. We created about 16 million jobs in his 2 terms. As Speaker, I worked with President Bill Clinton on exactly the same thing, lower taxes, less regulation, more American energy. We created about 11 million jobs in 4 years. So I would start with, if you go to newt.org, you'll see a whole list of tax cuts, regulatory cuts, changes designed to create jobs, starting with the repeal of Obamacare and the repeal of Dodd-Frank, which both are killing jobs. But specifically here in South Carolina, I want to say 3 things. We should be actively developing the natural gas offshore. You have $29 billion plus of natural gas. Those jobs in Louisiana pay $80,000 a year and create a tremendous industry. We should be taking part of the royalties from developing offshore natural gas, finish out both in Charleston and in Georgetown, modernizing the harbors. The Panama Canal is going to be widened in 2014. We dramatically want to widen the harbor and get this so that this is the most modern port for export purposes, even more than import. Third, by using the right tax policies, we want to rebuild manufacturing in South Carolina. I want to be the president who is here with Tim, watching the first container ship of South Carolina manufactured goods going to China from the United States.
Thank you very much. Let's go to our next question in the audience. Your name and your question for the speaker.
Mr. Speaker, my name is Ted McKnight. The Founding Fathers were opposed to a national bank, thus no Federal Reserve. Who do you think has a better grasp of what is best for our country, you or the Founding Fathers?
Well, since I'm a historian who's written a whole series of books about the Founding Fathers, I would think that they have the better grasp consistently, and that's why I would substantially reduce the power of the Federal Reserve. I would audit it annually. I would call for Bernanke to resign or ask that he be fired the first week I'm president. I would insist on releasing all of the decision memos of the last 3 years so we, the American people, can understand how the money, our money, was distributed. And I deeply oppose the Federal Reserve propping up the euro and helping the Germans try to sustain their financial domination of Europe.
Thank you very much. And next question, please.
Mr. Speaker, my name is Dave Brumbaugh. Participants in the private economy understand that creative destruction is a fact of life. How do you defend the vilification of companies that are willing to put capital at risk in order to save failing companies?
I don't, and I've never done that. Let me answer you. We're going to go to Georgetown tomorrow. Georgetown has a steel mill, which was closed. Capital wasn't put at risk. Capital was drained out of that company. Governor Romney ran saying he created 100,000 jobs in the private sector. And let me just say,
Mr. Speaker, we've said we will not allow any comment on the other candidates.
I'm trying to answer his question. So let me say it differently.
Okay.
I believe that it's fair to ask that records be clear and that people reveal what happened. My total record's clear. I've helped found 4 small companies, and in every case we did exactly what you talked about. But I think to ask questions about a particular company is not the same as attacking capitalism. And I don't see how you can expect us to have a presidential campaign in which an entire sector is avoided. And I guarantee you, if we Republicans avoid it, our nominee in the fall is not going to find that Obama avoids it at all. So we've got to be prepared to answer every question, and this is true of all of us. Every single candidate has to be prepared to answer the questions before the nomination so that we know that whoever we nominate is capable of surviving the fall campaign.
All right. Let's go quickly to our next question. Your name, please, and your question for Mr. Speaker.
Hi, Mr. Speaker. I'm Rebecca Connolly, and my question is, I voted for President Obama. It was the first time as a lifetime Republican voting for a Democratic president. My question is, when the entire, well, it appears the entire population of this country is sick of partisan gridlock, why would you use bipartisan cooperation as a weapon against your opponents when it seems counterproductive to making real progress kind of across the aisle?
Well, I actually agree with what you just said. When I worked with President Reagan, we had to get 1/3 of the Democrats in the House to vote for his program because Tip O'Neill was still Speaker. So we developed a bipartisan approach to creating jobs and taxes, and we succeeded. We got about 1/3 of the Democrats to vote with us. When I was Speaker, we were faced with the fact that Bill Clinton was president. So if I was going to get welfare reform signed into law, I had to find out a way to get Bill Clinton to sign it. If I was going to get the first tax cut in 16 years signed into law, I had to find a way to get Bill Clinton to sign it. If we were going to get 4 straight balanced budgets, I had to find a way to get him to sign it. So I agree with you. You look at the total mess in Washington today, you're not going to fix this country's problems just with speeches. You've got to find a way to bring the parties together, but it has to be principled. I work to bring them together on our values and our terms of lower taxes, welfare reform, and a balanced budget. I didn't move to the left to get their support. I got the country to move them to the right to get their support.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I'm tempted to ask, you voted for Obama the last time. How's that working out for you? But I won't do that. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Mr. Speaker, we're going to continue with you and do the remainder of your time right after this break from Charleston. Stay with us. We shall be right back. We continue with former Speaker Newt Gingrich. We're going to go right back to the audience. And our next question, please.
Good evening, Speaker Gingrich. My name is Heather McDonough. How do you plan to contest the class warfare attack mode of the Obama campaign, especially since the majority of the media is supporting it?
Heather, that's a great question, and I guess that's where, having worked with Governor Reagan since 1974 and then President Reagan since 1981, is a big advantage. He was faced with the same challenge. I want to basically pose to the American people a simple question. Over here you have a policy which, with Reagan and with me as Speaker, created millions of jobs. It's called paychecks. Over here you have the most successful food stamp president in American history, Barack Obama. Now, if you like class warfare with food stamps, you have a terrific candidate. But if you'd like Americans to work, I don't believe in 99% and 1%. I believe in 100% of Americans working together to create jobs. So every time the president starts down the class warfare road, I'm going to say, oh, yeah, you mean the business that has cost us jobs, led people to be unemployed, and put more Americans on food stamps than any president in history? I'd rather follow the tradition of bringing all Americans together to encourage entrepreneurship, to get every American the opportunity to pursue happiness by earning their own paycheck. That, I think, is the right answer on class warfare.
Thank you very much. Our next question.
Hi, Mr. Speaker. My name is Kimberly Williams, and I've been a federal employee for over 20 years, which is not a very popular job to have right now. But I want to thank you for coming. And my question is this. There's been a lot of talk among all of the candidates about the increase in federal jobs with the Obama administration and the average federal employee salary of $120,000, which, by the way, I do not make, nor does anybody I work with. And my question is, how are you going to cut the federal deficit without cutting federal jobs?
Well, Kimberly, let me start by pointing out, to be fair to everybody, you know, we talk about federal employees, but we'd like to control the border. We talk about federal employees, but we're really proud of the young men and women in uniform who are serving this country and the people in our intelligence community and, candidly, many State Department people who risk their lives. So I think we need to think a little bit about the customs agent who helps us down at the port, make sure that trade goes in and out of South Carolina, is a federal employee. The agricultural agent who helps bring new products and new ideas to the farmers is a federal employee. So I think an intelligent conservative wants the right federal employees delivering the right services in a highly efficient way, and then wants to get rid of those folks who are wasteful, or those folks who are ideologically so far to the left, or those people who want to, frankly, dictate to the rest of us. So I would like to replace the Environmental Protection Agency with a brand new Environmental Solutions Agency, because the current EPA, I think, is hopelessly committed to dictation rather than to cooperation. I think it's the wrong model. I would apply the concept of Lean Six Sigma. I do believe we can have a dramatically more productive federal government, but I think good federal employees would like the chance to break out of the current rules and regulations and actually be productive and not be trapped in bureaucracy that's unproductive.
Thank you very much. Let's go to our next question for the Speaker.
Mr. Gingrich, my name is Chris Marin. My federal taxes increased in the beginning of the new year, and my employer informed me that beginning in 2013, my health care insurance premiums would increase. If you're elected president, how fast will you be able to reverse these increases?
Well, this is a really good question, Chris, because if I'm elected president and don't have a team in the House and Senate, the answer is not. That's why the election this fall has to be a team election. We have to try to win Senate seats. We have to make sure we win House seats. We have to run as a team. Now, if we can run a team campaign and the American people come along and say, yes, we want to go in the direction of conservatism, lower government, lower taxes, more productivity, then I would ask the Congress to stay in session on January 3rd, and I would ask them to repeal Obamacare, repeal Dodd-Frank, and repeal Sarbanes-Oxley before I'm sworn in. Hold them at the desk. And I would like, on the day I'm inaugurated, to sign the repeal of all three. And that would give you sort of a jump start. And the same day, I wanted to sign an executive order abolishing all of the White House czars as of that moment. So that gives you the right direction.
Mr. Speaker, we only have about 30 seconds left, so I'm going to ask you a very quick one to close out the segment. If there's anything about the election laws that you could change if you just had the power universally to do it, what would it be?
I would eliminate all the current Mickey Mouse bureaucracy, all the limits, and I would say anyone can give any amount of after-tax income to the campaign if they report it every night. You'd get rid of all the super PACs, you'd get rid of all the negativity, and then the candidates would be in control, and the candidates would be responsible. It would be a dramatically better system and a more honorable system.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Great to have you here.
Good to be
My
with you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
We're going to also see the Speaker at the end with all of the other candidates for closing remarks. Still ahead, Rick Santorum and Rick Perry. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Huckabee Forum 2, South Carolina Undecided. Our next presidential candidate is former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum. Please welcome Senator Santorum. Good to see you, Rick. I got to say, you got the vest on. Senator, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. And I was commenting on your vest. I see you wore that today.
Yeah, that's been. It started out actually, Mike, at your forum in Des Moines, and we went out, and everyone else was wearing a suit, and I came out with a vest, and things went well that night. And so you started the trend for me, so I figured I'd keep it up.
Well, it's working for you today. So let's go out to Congressman Tim Scott, who has our first question for Senator Santorum.
First question comes from Kimberly Williams.
Hi, Senator. Welcome to Charleston, and thank you for coming here on behalf of all of us undecided voters. First of all, many of us Christian conservatives feel the same way you do about abortion, about the sanctity of human life. But please tell me what you would do in order to win over the liberals and the independents that you would have to win over in order to beat Obama in November.
That's a great question. Thank you, Kimberly. And I just go back and look at my record. I've run 5 races. 4 of them I was victorious, all in heavily Democratic areas, all being mostly outnumbered and outspent, and was able to go out and attract folks who didn't necessarily agree with me on those issues and, frankly, some other issues. Because I was always willing to go out and tell the truth, not just what I believed, what was popular in the moment, but what my core convictions are and why I believe them. And people, not everybody agrees with everything that you believe in, but what they want to know is that you believe what you believe. And folks trusted me that I would stand up and, in fact, do what I said. And I was doing it for the right reason, because I believed it was in the best interest of our country. And I was able to beat 2 Democratic incumbents, once for the House and once for the Senate, win a 60%, then 70% Democratic district, a state that had over 1 million more registered Democrats and Republicans. Really the only person in this race that has that kind of track record of being able to win the states that are necessary: Pennsylvania, Ohio, Missouri, Michigan, Indiana, the industrial states. And I put policies together that do that. For example, my policy on manufacturing. It appeals to the exact voters that built the Reagan coalition. Blue-collar, hardworking people who have been left behind by this economy. Well, we've got plans, and I've had a plan throughout my congressional career and Senate career that attracted those kind of voters, and that's why we were successful.
Thank you very much. Let's go to our next question.
Senator Santorum, my name is Ellen Worksman.
Hi.
My husband's been unemployed for over 4 years. We sold our big house. We moved into a much smaller house. We moved from the north down to the south where it was a little bit cheaper. Our 401k is pretty much gone. The IRA, because of the economy, is gone. What can you do for people in our position?
Well, I'm very sorry about that, first and foremost. And let me say, you moved to a beautiful area of the country. It's an area that my wife Karen, who's here with me, and our kids come to all the time. This state of South Carolina has been a sort of a vacation place for us to go down and spend some time. So you picked a good place. I would say that the best thing we can do is get this economy going for everyone in the economy. And that's why if you look at our plan, the Wall Street Journal the other day just rated our plan as a bold plan, better than many other plans that have been put out there. And the reason that I believe it'll work is because it does focus not just on the knowledge-based economy. And we are competing, and those who are white-collar workers, so to speak, are doing well, but with low rates of unemployment, about 4.3%. But the rest of the folks in the economy have still double-digit unemployment. And we need to create opportunities, and I believe it's in the manufacturing sector. You've seen what Boeing has done here to the Low Country. The Low Country has obviously a very diverse economy, but manufacturing is what creates wealth. We've seen it up in the upstate, just the vitality of having those workers. And it's not just blue-collar workers who work in manufacturing. You have designers and engineers and all sorts of other people. So it's a robust cross-section of the economy that can grow. We take the corporate tax for manufacturing and eliminate it. Why? Because we have seen our workforce cut in half in America in manufacturing, from 21% of the workforce down to 9%. We need to revitalize that sector of the economy, and the only way we're going to do it is compete against the countries that want to take those jobs. Why? Because they know manufacturing jobs create wealth. We know it too. You elect me, you let us put our complete plan together with regulatory and energy and all sorts of other things that we're going to do to make manufacturing competitive again, and we'll create jobs for your husband and a lot of other people here in South Carolina.
Thank you very much. I want to remind everybody that all the candidates get exactly the same amount of time. The way the structure of the program is, Senator Santorum, yours will be the only segment that isn't in one piece. We don't have a break, so we're going to go straight to the next question and continue right on. Your question, please.
Senator Santorum, welcome to Charleston. My name is David Mullen. I recently purchased 12 items from a national outdoor retailer. I'm pretty picky about what I buy. I usually look at labels to see where things are made. Due to getting the spirit of things, I didn't do that this time. I got home, everything I bought was made in China. So my question for you is, what action should the United States take concerning the trade imbalance with China?
Thank you for the question. And, you know, we went out and we're selling sweater vests on our website. And it took us a couple of days to be able to find a manufacturer that manufactured vests. So, South Carolina was huge in the textile industry. And as we know, it's not anymore. And the reason is, it goes back to the point I was making before. The National Association of Manufacturers found that if you exclude labor cost, America is 20% more expensive to manufacture in than our 9 top trading partners. And that includes China. And that's excluding labor. Everybody says, oh, we're losing jobs because of our labor costs. No, we're not. We're losing jobs because our government is making manufacturers uncompetitive. And they're doing it with high taxes. That's why we eliminate the corporate tax. They're doing it with regulations. This administration, in the past just 3 years, has gone from, on average, during Bush and Clinton, of producing about 60 regulations per year. They produce thousands, but 60 that are the really onerous, high-cost regulations that make us uncompetitive on a variety of fronts. Those are regulations that cost over $100 million. I support a piece of legislation, by the way, that will require Congress to approve those regulations instead of the Obama administration or any administration putting those high costs in the American business community without some sort of congressional approval. But this administration has not done 60 a year, as it was in the last 16 years. They did 150 of those types of regulations last year. They are crushing the entrepreneurial spirit. I was up in Greenville the other day, and I had someone who was in the mortgage business, and they said, I went from 30 minutes a week spending time on regulations to 3 hours a day after Dodd-Frank. It is crushing my business. I'm getting out. We need to have regulatory reform. So what I'll do is I will repeal every single regulation that cost over $100 million and replace them with ones, if necessary, that are more competitive for our businesses.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to the audience. Your name and your question, please, for Senator Santorum.
My name is Robert Booth, Mr. Santorum, and my question is, how can you call yourself a true conservative when you voted 6 times to raise the debt limit?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Robert. And it was 5, by the way. At least that's what Ron Paul says. I haven't checked. Here's the issue. Have I voted and have I worked to get that budget deficit down and balance the budget and take care of the serious issues that we're dealing with? Unfortunately, when you're a United States senator or congressman, you're not the president of the United States, and you can't unilaterally stop spending, which I could, by vetoing bills and proposing budgets. And so you're in a situation where you can work toward lowering spending, and I have. I was the author of welfare reform when I was in the United States House and managed that bill on the floor of the United States Senate. It's the first and only time that we actually repealed a federal entitlement, cut the money, block grant in the state, and froze spending on this. I want to do the same thing and can do the same thing on a whole variety of other programs. I've led on Social Security reform. I've led on Medicare reform. And I did so as a senator from the state with the second oldest per capita population of seniors in the country. If you really want to do something about not ever increasing the budget debt ceiling, you've got to deal with entitlements. Nobody else in this race, and frankly, very few politicians at all, with the exception of Jim DeMint here, and I worked with him to actually do something about where the structural problem is, and that's entitlements. That's my strength. We've fought those wars. We will continue, and this time, as president, I'll have the ability to lead and succeed on all fronts, not just one.
All right, let's take our next question, please. Go right ahead.
Welcome, Senator Santorum, to the Low Country. My name is Judy Bennett, and my question concerns the unemployed over 50, especially those who have not yet reached the age of Social Security. Personally, my sister, 58, exhausted her efforts, unemployment benefits, and then took her IRA and bought a small business. What say you to those who don't have resources to do this?
Well, I mean, the most important thing is you brought up something that's really important is folks with experience like your sister and others who can then take that experience, unlike younger folks, and be able to use that in a way to build their own business. And this really gets back to the fact that this administration has had this crushing regulatory burden as well as tax burden on entrepreneurs. And if you go back to the comment I made from the man from Greenville, everyone says the Republican Party is the party of big business. That's just false. We're the party of small business. We're the party of the little guy, the small market guys, the entrepreneurs. The Democrats President Obama loves big business. Why? Well, because it's harder to chase around all these little small businesses to tell them how to run their business. It's easier if you can just deploy regulators and tax agents and actually embed them in these large companies and watch them very, very closely and have this symbiotic relationship where big business can comply with all of these regulations. And it's the little guy who has to spend 3 or 4 hours a day complying who gets driven out of business. That means less competition for the big guy. So the most important thing we can do is not just reducing the tax burden, but this regulatory burden that I've talked about is absolutely key if we're going to have opportunities for those who want to start their businesses and provide for their families.
We have less than 2 minutes to go, so we want to get hopefully as many as we can. Next question, please, from our audience.
Senator, my name is Tom Chulevich, born and raised in Erie, Pennsylvania, and now a proud South Carolinian. You have spoken passionately on many occasions concerning abortion. How do you justify administration of the death penalty for a variety of crimes, but fail to support abortion in the case of pregnancies resulting from rape and incest? How is the taking of an adult life different than the life of an unborn?
Well, first off, I don't have an exception for rape and incest. I believe that all human life is sacred and all innocent human life should be protected. And so I have no exceptions for those two. And with respect to the death penalty, we're not talking about innocent human life. It's very interesting. I was asked this question at a debate, how I could have an exception. I was too radical because I did not have an exception for rape and incest. And I told the questioner, I said that the Supreme Court recently ruled that someone convicted of rape was not subject to capital punishment, that would be cruel and unusual punishment. But that same Supreme Court said that a child in the womb who conceived from that rape could be killed. That is a country that has its morals upside down, and it's one that
Senator, thank you very much. I appreciate your being here. Thank you very much. And coming up, Texas Governor Rick Perry, and later, Mitt Romney, Jon Huntsman, Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum will rejoin us for their closing remarks. Stay with us from Charleston, South Carolina.
What do I want? Find out what's new, what's coming up, and talk it all up with other Fox fans wherever you go. Plus, go behind the scenes and get special previews exclusively for Fox fans like you.
Welcome back to Huckabee 4 on 2 from South Carolina, the undecided voters. Our next presidential candidate is Texas Governor Rick Perry. Please welcome Governor Rick Perry. How you doing, Governor?
Hey, brother.
Great to see you, man.
Yes, sir. You too.
Thanks for being here.
It's excited to be here. Good looking boots you have on.
Thank you. They were made in Texas.
Yes,
You'll be happy to hear
absolutely.
that. I'm going to turn you over to Congressman Tim Scott, and he'll introduce the first question for you, Governor.
First question comes from Victor Finvesh.
Tim, thank you. Mama Scott, it's good to see you.
Good morning. My question is, having lived in New York for many years, I have seen an extreme number of people taking advantage of welfare and disabilities, people who have never worked a day in their lives. What is your exact plan to get people off of welfare and keep them from taking advantage of the system?
Yeah. Well, obviously, good question. Obviously, having good tests in place and as the governor of the 13th largest economy in the world over the course of the last 11 years, we've had an opportunity to make sure that you have practices in place. But at the federal level, one of the most important things that we can do is have a Health and Human Service agency that's really focused on fraud and corruption that we know goes on. I mean, there are billions of dollars that can be saved out of our Health and Human Services budget by auditing and having that type of program in place. And frankly, that's going to be one of the places that we really work. In our state, we've been able to save $5 billion, partly by consolidating some of those agencies, but also by putting an Office of Inspector General into place. And that would be one of the things that I would do at the Office of Inspector General to make sure that we have clear guidelines and that fraud and corruption get cut out of that federal agency.
Thank you very much. Let's go to our next question.
Good morning, Governor Perry. My name is Mike Farmer. As a small businessman, I have to spend a great deal of my time considering tax implications of any business decision I make. I'd like to know how we can simplify the tax codes for businesses to make it easier for businessmen to make decisions based on their business opportunities and not tax codes.
Yes, Ms. Farmer, you're going to like my tax plan because that 20% flat tax, matter of fact, Steve Forbes has endorsed it and the Club for Growth said it was the best plan of any of the candidates running for the presidency. So a 20% flat tax where you still have your deduction for your homeowners or your home mortgage, for charitable deductions, for local taxes. We get rid of the capital gains tax. We get rid of the benefits, the Social Security benefits tax, and get rid of capital gains. You take 20% of that, put it on a postcard and send it in, and we'll get rid of the IRS as we know it.
Let's go to our next question for Governor Perry.
And Mr. Farmer, I guarantee even Timothy Geithner can get his taxes in on time with a plan like that.
All right, next question, please.
Hello, Governor Perry. My name is Diane McKinnon.
How are you?
How are you, sir?
Excellent, thank you.
My question is about your possible vice presidential pick. Would you want someone, man or woman, who would fill the spot, make appearances like a Joe Biden? Or would you want someone, man or woman, who would be actively involved in your administration like a Dick Cheney?
Mike, what you got going on next year?
Hosting this show.
He was my neighbor, so I can tell you, I know this guy knows how to compete. So listen, to answer your question seriously, it will be an individual who is very much philosophically in tune. It would be an individual that looks like me from the standpoint of my philosophy. The vice presidency truly is that one heartbeat away from the presidency. And you want an individual that's a partner. You want an individual that, you know, Lord willing, I'm going to live for a long time and be healthy through all those years. But you want to make sure that that individual is someone that shares your passion for this country, shares your passion for small businesses, shares your passion for the defense of this country. And so that individual, whoever he or she might be, will be someone who is identical from a philosophical standpoint, and I can assure you that.
Thank you very much. Go to our next question from our audience.
My name is Luther Hughes. Governor, I'd like to know, as president, what executive action would you take regarding the out-of-control Labor Relations Board?
Well, I'd probably just do away with it and put it over in the Department of Labor, and then considerably. You know, it's really interesting that this NLRB issue is one of three. All of our states, I know Nikki's here in the audience, and we compete against each other. I mean, we're big believers in the 10th Amendment, and we fight for getting those jobs into our states and what have you. And each of our states are under assault right now by this administration. But we may be under assault. South Carolina, they're actually at war with you. I mean, the idea that they would come in here with their Justice Department and take on your voter identification law, that they would come in here and take you to task, and you're having to spend money to defend your sovereign right to have immigration laws put into place because you're doing your job. That is a powerful message. And those two are only trumped by the NLRB and coming in here and telling Boeing that you cannot come to South Carolina and create jobs and create all this wealth because you're a right-to-work state. That is just wrong. And when I'm the President of the United States, you don't have to worry about seeing the Justice Department in here messing in your business.
Governor Perry, thank you very much. We're going to continue with Governor Perry. More questions right after the break. Stay with us from Charleston. Welcome back to Charleston, South Carolina. For our Forum of Undecided Voters, we continue with Texas Governor Rick Perry. Let's go right back to the audience and get some more questions. Go right ahead.
Hi. Welcome to both you governors to South Carolina and to Charleston. My name is Debbie Jones, and my question is, because the federal government spends $4 billion a day, more than it takes in, will you make it a priority to cut federal spending immediately by 10% within your first 100 days in office as president?
Yes, ma'am. As a matter of fact, we have a plan on rickperry.org where you can see our actual budget that we lay out, where we talk about not only that tax plan that I talked about earlier, but the spending cuts that we need to make and how we balance the budget by 2010 and cap the spending at 18% of gross domestic product. I mean, that is a powerful commitment. I mean, you got to ask yourself, are you better off today than you were $4 trillion ago? I mean, and that's the answer. And cutting the spending, and I've got a record of doing that. And I know everybody likes to talk about we're going to cut this and we're going to cut this much and what have you. But I'm the only person on the stage that's come across here today that I've signed 6 balanced budgets, and you know how tough that is, having been a governor yourself. 6 balanced budgets. We cut $15 billion out of our budget in Texas this last time, because the other side of that is you got 2 choices. You either raise taxes in Washington, D.C., they raise the debt ceiling, or you're going to make reductions in spending. I've done that. I've got a track record as the governor of the 13th largest economy in the world of cutting that spending. We had 64 different times that we've cut taxes in that state. And people have come to Texas because they know that there's still a land of opportunity in America. That state has 1,300 people that come in every day, and they're coming there because they know they can still come and they can risk their capital and have a chance to have a return on their investment. And that's what Americans are pleading for. They just want a president of the United States that understands that it is the small businessmen and women that drive this country. It is the tax policy. The CEO of Coca-Cola said that it's easier to do business in communist China than it is in the United States of America. That's nuts. We need to cut the taxes, cut the regulation, and bring that manufacturing back to the United States. And that's the way you do it.
Thank you very much. Let's go to our next question from our audience. Yes, sir.
Welcome, Governor Perry.
Yes, sir.
My name is Nat Hubbard, and I'm personally concerned about ridiculous regulations by the Environmental Protection Agency.
Ooh, me too.
And I would like to know what your stance on that would be. And specifically, are you in favor of eliminating that agency? And if not, why?
Yes, sir. Well, I will tell you that I'm not sure that there's a state that's been under any more assault than the state of Texas by the EPA, whether it's this cross-state pollution act that we've got a federal court to block, whether it's coming in and taking over our Clean Air Act. I mean, they are absolutely out of control, spewing out regulations on a regular basis. And what I would do is I would pull back every regulation that's gone forward since '08. And I would audit them and I would test them for this. Do they create jobs or do they kill jobs? If they kill jobs, they're out. Automatically, that's what would be the test. Then that agency I would rebuild, because that agency can be substantially smaller. It actually can be a repository for best practices where Nikki and the states can find the best practices, but it also needs to be substantially reduced. And I'm talking about substantially reduced. And the bulk of those regulations should be dealt with at the state level. I trust Nikki and her members of the legislature to make decisions that are in the best interest of the people. It's your air and your water. I mean, for crying out loud, I trust the people of South Carolina to make the decisions on their environment substantially more than some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. that's probably never even stepped foot into this state.
We have less than 2 minutes to go with Governor Perry, so we'll try to get as many as we can. Next question, please, from our audience.
Hi, Governor Perry. My name is Justin Deering.
Hey, Justin.
I'd like to know if you think the American manufacturing jobs that have already moved to China, if they're ever likely to come back, and if not,
yes, sir.
What jobs of the sectors do you think are most likely to grow during your presidency?
Yes, sir. They can come back, and they will come back. People didn't move away just because they had the opportunity to find some cheap labor. They left because we overtaxed them when we overregulated them. And think about all of the dollars that are offshore from U.S. companies that have invested offshore, and they've made those profits. And to bring them back in today, they have to pay 35% rate. Well, that money's not going to come back in, Governor. I mean, it's going to stay offshore. So in my tax plan, I talk about taxing that offshore money, and it's $1.7 trillion at 5.25% for 1 year. The American Chamber of Commerce estimates 3.6 million jobs can be created when $1 trillion of that comes back onshore and is then put into our economy. But the place that you will see, America's always been a country where the next big thing, I mean, Steve Jobs and what he innovated and people like him, and some private sector small entrepreneur who is creating the next big thing. We need to be giving them the incentive to be onshore doing that and not driving them off with tax policy and regulatory policy. That's the reason that 20% flat tax, not only on the personal side, but a 20% corporate income tax, that will make America competitive. That's the way to get America ahead. Tax and regulatory reform. Do it.
Governor Perry, thank you. You were right exactly on the time.
Right on.
I didn't even have to cut you off whatsoever. I appreciate it. It's great to have you here. Up next, we are going to bring all 5 of the candidates back. We'll get closing remarks on tonight's forum. You will want to stay to see what their final argument to you is, just like all these undecided voters here in Charleston. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our forum in Charleston, South Carolina. Each of the 5 candidates had equal time to answer the questions from our undecided voters here in our audience. Now they're going to join us once again, and each one will have 1 minute to give us their closing remarks. The order in which they appear on the stage was determined by a drawing prior to tonight's forum. First up, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. Governor Romney.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for this opportunity, and Governor Haley and also Congressman Scott. Appreciate the chance to be with you. I think you in Charleston and across South Carolina recognize that this election is about more than just replacing a president. This is an election about the soul of America. This nation was founded upon principles that said we would be an opportunity nation, that people could come here and work hard and get education and take risk and pursue their dreams, and their success would not make the rest of us poorer. It would make the rest of us better off. We have a president who has a very different view. He wants to make America a European-style welfare state, an entitlement nation, where the role of government is not to create opportunity, but instead to take from some to give to others. That's not working in Europe. It sure as heck wouldn't work here. This president wants to make government bigger. I want to make it smaller. He wants to expand health care controlled by the government. I want to get rid of Obamacare. He's somebody who wants to spend more money than we take in year after year after year. I want to cut, cap, and balance our federal budget. This is a time of decision for the American people. This president says he wants to fundamentally transform America. I want to restore to America the principles that made us the hope of the earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Next up, for a closing remark, Texas Governor Rick Perry.
You know, the country that I volunteered to serve as a pilot in the United States Air Force is still the greatest country on the earth. But Washington, D.C. is broken. And we need a president of the United States that understands how to bring change and bring real change, because Washington and Wall Street are corrupt. And we need a president who understands that we're going to have an outsider come into Washington, D.C., that clearly has the background and the track record to bring that needed change and that radical change to Washington, D.C. I've always lived a purpose-driven life. It's never been my purpose to be the President of the United States or to get rich. It's been my purpose to serve our country. And that is why I'm in this race for the United States presidency. We need to make sure that we have a president with a plan, a tax plan, a balanced budget plan, a way to radically change Washington, D.C. with a part-time Congress. Send them home, let them work part-time, and then keep that radical change in place. I'm Rick Perry, and I ask you for your support right here in South Carolina and across America. God bless you.
Thank you, Governor Perry. Great to see you. I appreciate it. Next up, former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum.
Thank you very much, Governor. Thank all the folks here in South Carolina. Karen and I decided to take on this challenge to run for president, not because I wanted to be the most powerful person in America, because I wanted to return the power to the people of America. That's what this campaign's all about. We have a big decision. I don't care how old you are. This is the most important election of your lifetime. And what I would say to the people of South Carolina, you have an incredible opportunity to speak loudly as to what America needs. And you know what America needs. America needs someone who respects and reflects the values of the people of America. South Carolina has good, strong, traditional, conservative values. The values that made this country great, the founders' values. That's South Carolina. I would ask the people of South Carolina to reflect those values in this election, to vote for someone, be strong, be bold, and lead this country. You voted for Ronald Reagan in 1980 when everyone said, pick somebody else who can win. And you said no, because you saw in Reagan something that the rest of the country didn't yet know. Believe in those values and reflect them in those votes coming up on Saturday, and we can restore this country to greatness. Thank you.
Senator, thank you very much. Great to see you. Next up, former Utah Governor Jon Huntsman.
Governor, I'm honored and pleased to be here in this great state of South Carolina, honored by the support of people like the Carroll Campbell family, Henry McMaster, and Alan Wilson. I want people leaving this auditorium with two things in mind. Number one, I will always put my country first. The principles that my two boys are learning as they begin their military careers. Why is that important? It's important because, point number two, this country has a trust deficit that we need to resolve. We no longer trust our institutions of power, and we no longer trust our elected officials. And I want to lead the charge that brings term limits to Congress. And I want to close that revolving door that allows members of Congress to file right on out, where they trade in on their insider information and relationships to become lobbyists. And I want to get our troops out of Afghanistan. And finally, I want to right-size those banks that are too big to fail. Ladies and gentlemen of South Carolina, I want your vote. But most importantly, I want your trust, because that's the most valuable thing one human being can give to another. Thank you so very much.
Governor Huntsman, thank you. Great to see you. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
Next up, former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich.
Mike, I want to thank you. I want to thank the College of Charleston and all the folks who are here today. This may be the most important election of our lifetime, because if Barack Obama gets reelected, I believe he will be so radical in his second term, having been vindicated, that we can't imagine what it will be like. So this election really matters, and your votes in the South Carolina primary are decisive, I think, once again, as they have been since 1980, in picking somebody. It's very simple. Who can defeat Barack Obama? Who can help change Washington? Who can help create jobs? I think we need a solid conservative who can win the debates to defeat Barack Obama. I think that we need someone with an experience of changing Washington, which I did with Ronald Reagan in the 80s, and as Speaker with welfare reform, balanced budgets, tax cuts, and 4.2% unemployment we did in the 90s. Finally, I've helped create 16 million jobs with Ronald Reagan, 11 million jobs as Speaker. With your help and your vote, I believe we can get America back to work, and that's the only way that America works, is when Americans are working. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Great to see you. Well, coming up, we're going to go back to the undecided voters and our audience, and then we're going to find out if they were satisfied with what they heard from the candidates and whether their answers brought them a little closer to making a decision, as it may have happened with you. Stay with us. We will be right back from Charleston, South Carolina. Undecided voters in South Carolina. We brought them here to ask their questions. Let's find out, have they made a decision? Let's go out to Brian Tatterman. You had a question earlier. I want to ask you, tell me your reaction to the answer that you got, and are you closer to a decision?
Well, I think that he kind of skipped away from the question. He started talking about military spending. And
your question, by the way, was to Governor Romney?
Yes, and well, yeah, everybody agrees that we should have the strongest military in the world. I mean, that was kind of not the gist of my question. I really wanted him to basically convince me that he's not a Keynesian, and then a choice between him and Obama in November wouldn't be economically inconsequential. And, you know, with this growing libertarian wing of the Republican Party, I mean, he may even have to pick a Rand Paul as a running mate to get someone like me on board.
But now you indicated that you are, in fact, a Ron Paul supporter, yes. So not completely undecided when you came.
Well,
are you less decided or more undecided?
No, I'm more for Ron Paul.
Okay.
You know, after this, even though he's not even here, it's just everything that he says I've agreed with.
All right. Well, we appreciate it very much. Let's go to Ellen Werksman. You had a question for Senator Santorum. A very powerful personal story. Did the senator's answer satisfy you, Ellen?
Well, not really, because I'm not sure how at age 60, I mean, as much as manufacturing needs to come back into this country, I am all for that. But my husband's 60 years old, and I'm not sure bringing manufacturing back is going to get him a job, you know, and the older Americans that don't have jobs right now, that aren't ready to fully retire, you know, what are they supposed to do? How are we supposed to survive when we've already been through, you know, like you're spending down your 401k and your IRA and everything else?
All right. Ted McKnight had a question for Speaker Gingrich regarding the Founding Fathers and dealing with the Federal Reserve. Did the Speaker's answer satisfy you, Ted?
I liked the fact that he agreed that the Founding Fathers had a better grasp on what is best for this country. Unfortunately, he then went the opposite direction. He wanted to still keep the Fed. I would have appreciated an answer that would have said that the Fed should be transitioned to extinction within about 5 years. His example of getting rid of Bernanke is great, but if we've looked at President Obama's appointments over the last 3 years, we can see what happens with allowing one person to appoint a very powerful person to a very powerful position. The founders would have wanted to have the wisdom of multiple people, not just one. And this idea of using our money to bail out the euro, I agree with that as not being a good idea, but we have the Fed with all this quantitative easing destroying the purchasing power of the dollar, which is a stealth tax on all of us.
Okay, I'm going to have to cut you off and keep going. We've got a lot of folks here we want to get to. Justin Deering, you had a question for Governor Perry regarding manufacturing jobs returning from China. Tell me what you thought of his answer when he responded.
Well, I liked his enthusiasm. I liked his idea of a 5.25% tax on those offshore profits coming back in. You know, if we don't have something in place, it's not likely to incentivize the companies to bring them back. I don't think he gave me any specific answers about what job sectors he thinks are going to grow. It was more about, oh, well, let's Steve Jobs and other people, innovators out there, just let them do what they just do. You know, let's just give them the tools to do that.
All right.
So.
David Tilley, you had a question for Governor Huntsman. Respond. It was about the space program.
Yes, sir. I was partially satisfied. I like the fact that he said that he would not subcontract out manned spaceflight to other countries. But the United States does not have a viable man-rated launch system. The other part of my question is, what would he do about that? Whether it's NASA or private industry, either way, but either way, the development of a man-rated launch system needs to be expedited quickly.
I appreciate all of you. I appreciate everybody here. We're going to have some final comments. When I return, I'll be talking with our host, Congressman Tim Scott, and get his perspective on how this event helped him make a decision, as we hope it helped make you. We will be right back with our final segment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Joining me once again, our host, South Carolina Republican Congressman Tim Scott. Congressman, this has been a remarkable afternoon. We've had a room full of undecided voters.
Absolutely.
They've asked some very tough questions of all the candidates. Nobody came in here and skated. Did you feel any candidate rose to the occasion in a way that was exceptional today?
You know, I thought they all did a very good job, and it's one of the reasons why so many voters in South Carolina are still undecided is because our candidates are raising their game. So I was excited about the performance of all the candidates. I haven't picked my own yet, so I'm still working through that process.
You know, if it's any consolation, neither have I. And I know a lot of people think, you know, you have all these favorites. I like all these guys. And one of the things that I saw here today, I would be proud to stand on the stage and gleefully support any one of these individuals. They impressed me with their candor and their willingness to come in here to really what was a tough room with tough questions, and none of them flinched. Not one of them flinched and backed off and took a powder. They all stood their ground.
Absolutely. There's no question that any of our current nominees would be better than the guy in the White House right now.
We are 1 week away, from the South Carolina primary. Is there one issue that is going to ultimately tilt this thing in the favor of a candidate, and are we in for a surprise?
Well, I tell you, with almost 10% unemployment in our state, I think the jobs issue and the one that we believe has the conviction to get it done will be the one that wins South Carolina.
Well, I want to say your remarkable hosting of these town halls, you've had all these candidates in individually. You helped bring all of them here today for this special edition, and I think it's been a remarkable day. I'd like to just ask one question of the audience. Show by applause if this forum has helped you as an undecided voter get closer to a point of decision. Has it helped you? Very good. It's been very worthwhile. Congressman Tim Scott, what a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
And a joy to be with you here in Charleston, South Carolina. I want to say make sure to tune in to the next Fox News Wall Street Journal Republican presidential debate. That's going to happen Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Moderated by Brett Baer. And also make sure to watch Fox News coverage of the South Carolina Republican presidential primary next Saturday, January the 21st. I want to say thanks to all these wonderful people here. What a delight it is to be in Charleston. Thank you for joining us. Now from the College of Charleston, good night, God bless. See you next time.